Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak for the backbenches in this farming debate and to welcome the Secretary of State. I haven't seen him in this role, and the great Minister, the Honourable Member for Keighley. And as someone from a farming family, it's very nice to know that we're in such strong hands. And to hear, I have to say today, such cross-party support for this key industry. And I think the sector will be grateful to know how strongly it is represented across this whole House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't have any particular interest to declare except that I come from a farming family. I narrowly escaped a career in farm management back in the day. I worked for Greens of Soham. I used to be a director of Elsam Seeds. I worked for the National Farmers Union back in the day when there was a thing called the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. And I used to chair the APPG on agricultural science and technology. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Minette Batters for her extraordinary leadership of an organisation that is not given at times to agility and to clarity. And she has brought a clarity to that sector. And I wish Tom Bradshaw, her successor, all the very best. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the record, I think the House knows I was not a great believer that the Brexit referendum would be immediately and easily implementable, that it would cause some difficulties and problems. But the one thing I was very excited about was the opportunity to replace the appalling common agricultural policy with all the mess and the bureaucracy and the chaos with a British, a UK farm and agriculture support framework. And that remains, I think, a very exciting opportunity, a framework that would give this great industry, for that's what it is, a great industry, the security, the long-term framework that history shows when we give it to farmers, they give us back exactly what it is that we want, a long-term secure policy with enough support and flexibility for the marginal hill farmers to protect the uplands and the beautiful countryside that we love, for the small family holdings whose economic marginality requires diversification and all of those other activities that we want to support them with. And in my part of the world, in East Anglia, global, world-class, competitive agriculture that can lead the way in growing the food the world needs. And it is a huge opportunity. And I just observed that in my 14 years in this House, agriculture has gone from being an industry that felt as if it wasn't properly recognised as an industry and was becoming to be seen by government as an activity of park keeping, to post-pandemic and post-Ukraine, a hugely important strategic sector, key to food security, and an opportunity for us globally. We need, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to double world food production by 2050 on the same land area with half as much water and energy. That is a global grand challenge, and this country is a powerhouse in the science, research and technology and agriculture to help make that possible. And the opportunity is that we set out a framework that unlocks the genius of our agricultural sector to show the world how you do it. And if we get that right, we'll also invigorate the rural economy. But of course, Brexit was 8 years ago, and I do pay tribute to the government's various commitments, the 2.4 billion ring-fence commitment, the sustainable farming incentive, the countryside stewardship, the food innovation programme, the food strategy, the animal health and welfare pathway, ELMS, and the PM's commitment at the recent NFU conference. But the real key to this is that the farming community can feel, see, experience that long-term level of clear, sustainable support. And I want to highlight one or two things that the farmers of Mid-Norfolk have highlighted to me that we have really still got to get right. Firstly, the importance of a really reliable long-term policy framework. Yes, for the commercial sector, but also the environmental framework, for skills and for innovation. This sector, post-war, knew that for 40 years they knew what we wanted them to do. They now need to know similarly that we know what we want them to do and we won't change our mind every 5 years, 3 years or 2 years. Secondly, recognition of agriculture as a strategic industry, key to our balance of payments, key to food security, key to our ability to connect to those huge global markets. And the public support figures show that the public now are with us. They weren't 20, 30 years ago. They didn't think of this as a great industry that they wanted to support. They do now. Thirdly, that we think about and understand that farmers are, first and foremost, mainly small businesses. And they're not sophisticated. Generally, they're not people with degrees or MBAs in business management. They're people who love what they do. And we need to understand and give them a framework that works for them as small businesses. And I would just make this point. It's a very unusual business that invests most of its costs up front in the hopeful pursuit of some revenues and profits downstream. Not many businesses do that. And we need to understand that reality. And that's partly why they need such security going forward. A number of colleagues have talked about food security, and I just make the point that it isn't the case that we are destined only to grow here the root crops and the potatoes and the traditional crops, and we have to import the salad crops. Vertical farming, incredible innovations in vertical farming mean that we are now able to produce salad crops here in this country. I've visited vertical farms. We have a great one in Norfolk at Fisher Farms, on a fraction of the land area, with a fraction of the energy and the chemicals that traditional farming has used. There is no reason why that food security target couldn't be a lot higher. And I would just make the point that, of course, we all want to see environmental agriculture, and I pay tribute to Kevin Bowes and the Breckland farmers, to the Upper Wensum Farmers Group, to the farmers at Wendling Beck. Actually, it's farmers in mid-Norfolk who are really shaping best practice in terms of agri-environment schemes. But when I recently went to visit a flagship project with Natural England, 20, 30 people who all come up from London, bought their wellies at the garage, Tony Juniper preaching rewilding, and I went to look at some land that as a farmer's boy I would think you could probably get 2 hectares an acre out of, and the finest minds in the land were trying to work out how we get nothing out of it at a time when we really need food production. And I am worried that the E in DEFRA sometimes triumphs over the F and the R and the A, and that we need to make sure that food is right back at the heart of that department, something I know this Secretary of State and the Minister are committed to. And I make the point about the environment because we all know that agriculture traditionally has been a very high-emitting industry, and we need to show the world how you move to a low-emission agricultural sector, and we are well positioned to do it, not least in the agricultural genetics and the breeding science at the Norwich Research Park, where we're pioneering drought-resistant crops that don't need highly carbon-intensive chemicals, and disease-resistant crops and drought-resistant crops for the rest of the world. And I do worry that in our chase for net zero, we make sure that the left hand and the right hand are coordinated. We're not doing anything for net zero if we're disrupting farming in East Anglia with endless solar farms and cables and pylons and disruption.
On that point,
I'll happily give way.
There's a simple thing the department can do, which I've asked them to do again and again, is we don't put solar farms on freebie land. We put them on warehouses, on inferior land, but not on good agricultural land in Lincolnshire and Norfolk.
I agree. And I just make the point then that if we're really going to lead the world in net zero agriculture, it's all about metrics, it's about data, it's about knowing when you pick up a pint of milk or a potato or a loaf of bread, what its actual environmental footprint is. With that, we can start to give the sector incentives and rewards for driving down the environmental footprint. Without it, we're condemned to follow environmental policies that are emotional, that are not connected to proper science and research. And if we get that right, the UK could be a leader in setting those environmental metrics. That brings me to water quality. I commend the fact that UK agriculture has achieved a 75% reduction in pollution, something very right. And in our part of the world, the nutrient neutrality model has been a really serious blow to farmers who are really taking very seriously water quality, reducing pig effluent, trying to make sure that they're getting the balance right. But clunky, bureaucratic, big schemes in Whitehall that weren't thought through properly are causing chaos in our part of the world in terms of both agriculture and housing. That brings me to flooding, and I have to say I agree with the Honourable Member for Selby and Ainsley, and it's good to hear colleagues from all corners of this House getting the problem. Large parts of mid-Norfolk are currently underwater. That's not good for agricultural productivity. Farms are holding up amounts of water for which they receive no support, and I have to say the Environment Agency, there's been a lot of talk recently of from the river to the sea. The basics of drainage, rivers are there to drain water off the land into the sea, and we could do with the Environment Agency putting dredging and the clearing of rivers at the top of the priority list to make sure that we actually get the water off the land properly. I'll happily give way.
He makes a really powerful point, and that's not just limited to Norfolk. I mean, as the Secretary of State himself will know, being a filed lad, that is something that's affecting my farmers. And the one thing that we are crying out for is water draining off land and letting farmers farm.
I couldn't agree more, and I know the Secretary of State with a constituency in North East Cambridgeshire knows as much and has lived as much the reality of getting water off the land as anybody. That brings me to labour shortages. We have had real problems in the last few years, post-Brexit, post-pandemic, and the minimum wage. Farmers really struggling, and when a horticultural grower of the calibre of Andy Allen has to plough back into the land his asparagus crop, prime English asparagus, because he can't find anyone to cut it, we are in real trouble. And I do worry that our agricultural colleges, some are fantastic. I think, have a place at Harper Adams, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if this career doesn't work out. But Eastern College in mid-Norfolk is not properly anticipating the future needs of a high-technology agricultural industry, and we need to make sure we're nurturing the skills of tomorrow. Our young farmers get it, but we need to make sure we're giving them the courses. I echo the comments that a number have made about the difference between landowners and farmers. They're not the same thing, and I just observe that many of the farmers I see are contract farmers. They're working 24/7, they're covering huge amounts of land, they're operating with higher and higher costs. The environmental payments tend to go to the landowners. We need to make sure that we are actually looking after the farmers, the people who are actually developing those skills and inspiring the next generation to come into this great industry. If we end up with an industry where it's the hedge funders owning all the land and there is no one actually able to farm it, we will have done ourselves no favours. And I do think quite a lot of those pressures explain why we've got such a problem with mental health in agriculture. When one farmer a week is taking their life, we need to really think about why and what it is that's driving that. I applaud the work the government's doing on production standards, and I do think that we have a great opportunity in these free trade deals to set the higher standards and to show that the UK is committed to showing the world how we produce more with less. And when it comes to free trade and tariffs, I would offer a zero tariff only to those who are using the world's very best technologies for zero-emission agriculture, and to create a market for the exporting of our net zero technologies. Sustainable intensification, delivering more with less, isn't just a strapline. The world desperately needs us to help them deliver it. And we have in our economy and in our sector here huge strength in the Norwich Research Park, in John Innes, in the Sainsbury Laboratory, in Aberystwyth, in Roslin, in Wellesbourne. We are a global powerhouse in science research. In fact, we spend about £500 million a year on it, but it doesn't feel like an agricultural sector that's underpinned yet by £500 million of research. And I know the Secretary of State is thinking hard about how we get that science and research better pulled through. Which brings me to agri-tech, a huge global sector. I was proud to set up our first agri-tech industrial strategy and the Catalyst Fund and the centres with my noble friend Lord Willits. And we have some amazing agri-tech companies here. But the key now is to adopt the technologies that they're producing. And I pay tribute to companies like Tropic Bioscience, the work going on at Rothamsted. But when a company like the Small Robot Company develops brilliant technology but can't find a market here to use it, I think that tells us as policymakers we've got to create a market in which those technologies are commercially viable and adoptable. And otherwise we'll end up incubating the rest of the world's agri-tech sectors and not actually deploying it here. And I just close on gene editing, a huge strength here in the UK, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not just in disease resistance and drought resistant crops, shifting from chemical to biological control systems, but in nutraceuticals, in functional foods, in novel foods. We could lead the world in a whole new sector of agriculture, and that regulatory leadership is key. I close by just making this point, that the opportunity that people voted for 8 years ago is still there. It's being born slowly. There have been many disruptions, but it is an exciting one if we get this right. We could trigger and be the crucible of a new agricultural revolution in which we show the world how you deliver high-quality, safe, highly productive, low-input agriculture based on innovation, with science, data, metrics, and the UK exporting that around the world. The alternative is that we create a jungle of well-intended green tape that gets in the way of a fundamentally commercial sector leading us into that new dawn. And I know that the ministers on the front bench understand this. My job is to speak for the people of Mid-Norfolk and to make sure that we in this House show we get it and we're there for a new generation who want to do the right thing for this country and for the globe.